The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
Cyberpunk. No, you're beautiful.
Yeah.
You're amazing? No, crap. What did he say? That's how old those memes are. That's how behind we are on doing this. I can't even remember what the popular joke was.
Well, and the worst thing is that we have perfectly threaded this needle to be pointless because it's no longer a nostalgia goggles and it's not old enough to be a nostalgia goggles. So we're doing it perfectly wrong, which good for us, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're still trying to branch out and try new things.
try the
wrong
punk
things.
that is Cybered.
Yeah. So we decided we were going to do an episode about Cyberpunk. I don't think we have anything new and novel to say about like the bugs or how immersive the world is or that the graphics are pretty good when they're not breaking catastrophically. Like, we're going to share our experiences with those things, but I wanted us to specifically have this conversation because I ended up having what I thought might be the correct story experience for this game that runs completely counter to everything. And you, I know, had a totally different experience than the one I'm going to share with you. And we have not talked about this at all offline. You're gonna be hearing all this for the first time.
Yep.
So that was the main thing I wanted us to be able to talk about. But real quick, this game was released for everything. It was released recently. It was made by CD Projekt Red, which is the company that did like The Witcher. They're big on like immersive universes, right? Right now, they are mostly famous for releasing one of the most broken games ever made, then being super sorry and fixing most of those bugs.
Which, don't get me wrong, it's better to release a not broken game, but it does speak to the like, hey, this wasn't just a cash grab. We do want this to be a nice thing. It's in the same vein as No Man's Sky, right? Where it was like, hey, amazing game. Everybody's like, this is not what you promised. And they're like, okay, so real talk, we know, but we're fixing it.
Right. We are sorry. We are not proud of this.
Like, it's like, hey, look at this thing I made. And everybody looks at it and they say, are you proud of this? And they hang their head and they're like, no. You know what you did, right? Yeah.
So I played I did my first and only full playthrough just like a couple months ago, right? And so it is 2025 as of this recording. So most of the major issues were patched out. A lot of the minor issues were patched out. I did encounter some bugs, but generally it is an absolutely completely playable game, right? Not that nothing ever went wrong, but like nothing like what it was like when it first released. When you played, like your first playthrough was, I think, almost a year ago. Did you
a couple years ago now, I think.
Okay, even worse. What was the state of the game when you played it?
It was still not super broken. There were occasional things. I would say that the brokenness when I played it fell into the Bethesda levels of broken, where like it would occasionally do weird glitchy stuff. A lot of the times it was never broken to the point where it ruined the gameplay or like broke the game to the point where I was like, oh, I have now lost tens of hours of my life because the game broke. So because of that, not losing that level of effort, a lot of the glitches and breaks seem kind of like fun or funny. And I don't know if this is even considered a glitch, but I think we mentioned it on the show once before where, if you are flooring it and then you get out of the car, you lose all of your momentum and the car loses none of its momentum. So you could like railgun cars at people. And I was like, I don't know if this is a bug or a feature, but this is fun, so that's kind of the level of glitchiness I was dealing with.
I don't know if you realize this, but you almost have like a video game donkey approach to games where you're like, what I care about is that the game is fun, not necessarily that the game works. Right. If you play a game and you are having a good time because it is broken in ways that are entertaining, you would still probably consider that a win.
Oh, absolutely. My wife still prompts me to tell some of the stories about my playthrough of Elder Scrolls Skyrim from a decade ago, in some of the unique ways that it broke, where it was hilarious. And there were some of them where it could have actually broken the game to the point where I was like soft locked. But yeah, no, it's that like those are the stories that endure. I never tell people about the one time I sat down and played 4 hours of Skyrim and everything went according to plan.
True. Yeah. Good stories include conflict.
Absolutely. But yeah, so that's about the degree to which it was broken when I played it.
Yeah. And I think I didn't encounter anything that made the game unplayable. Like the fact that for you that could include like weird physics bugs or weird graphics bugs, I don't think changes the spirit of your experience was not made worse by any specific bugs, right? Or at least not right. Like your experience wasn't ruined by any specific bugs. My threshold for that might be a little higher than yours, but you know, we hit the game. We both hit the game at a time in history where like we were comfortable with what we got.
Yes. I was not at any point like, oh man. And to be fair, I do remember when it first came out and people were like, this is fundamentally broken. And I did wait a year or two between those two. Because somewhere in there, because I do remember being like, well, I don't want to play a fundamentally broken game, but I waited until I saw a couple of articles come out where they were like, hey, it's kind of fixed now. And I was like, well, then I'll kind of play it. And from there.
Then I kind of care. Can I only kind of pay for it? So I'm going to drop a spoiler warning right now, woo or whatever, because I don't think I'm really going to be able to say much else without talking about some elements of the story. And it's mostly ruined for people by now. Like if you don't know what some of the major story beats are at this point, wow, I don't know how you did that, but I don't want anybody to say like we spoiled it for them and they didn't know. So from this moment on, I'm going to flippantly mention story stuff because it will be relevant to the things I have to say. So I don't know that it's new enough that I still feel like we should do that. So
I would say that it's something, if a video game came out 5 years ago and you care enough about it that you don't want it spoiled, and it didn't, like, you've probably played it by now. It's kind of like, you know, in line for the Titanic when we're like, oh yeah, I wonder how they're going to handle a ship sinking. And people are like, whoa, spoilers, man. It's just like, yeah, I mean, it famously sunk.
Yeah. I can't believe Darth Vader sinks the Titanic.
But too, and I did like though that they allowed him to give the one true ring to Frodo before the Titanic sank. You know,
yes, yeah,
because Vader's heart will go on.
Before Star Trek Voyager bites his finger off. I don't know how to make this any worse. Okay, so the reason I had to do the spoiler warning before we even started audio visuals is because in this game, your brain gets taken over by Keanu Reeves, and the entire crux of the game is to either get Keanu Reeves out of your brain or you will die, right? That's you will die because Keanu Reeves will like have taken over your body basically. So
right. And actually, if I remember correctly, not once you get about halfway through, not willfully, like he is not like trying to take you over. He's nobody's happy about this arrangement. He's not happy. You're not happy. Nobody's happy.
Yeah. Cause they're very much trying to set up a like, well, you two have now bonded over the course of the game. Are you going to let him kill you or are you going to kill him? But one of you has to die, right? Like that is the dichotomy they're ultimately setting up. And all the things you see along the way are going to ultimately inform the, you know, who lives and who dies decision. Knowing that, one of the fun graphical glitches I did encounter not long after you find out how badly he is breaking your brain is it was late at night. I was driving across town and I could have fast traveled, but like, it's fun to drive through the city, right? It's like a Grand Theft Auto-y Red Dead Redemption 2. Like,
it is.
The travel is part of the story, right? So like I'm driving and there's like no traffic around because I just didn't see a lot of traffic in the game for some reason. And it was late at night and I'm going over this bridge and part of the bridge just never rendered. So now my car is just flying through the air And I realized, because it's a long bridge connecting two like disparate parts of the city, and I realized I was holding my breath because I was like, is this part of the game? What is supposed to be happening? And then I got to the other side of the bridge and I was like back onto the regular streets, and they were rendered and everything was fine. And I was like, I don't think that was the game being like, whoa, Johnny's messing with your head. I think that bridge just didn't render, but like, I'll never know for sure.
Yeah, right. And I do think that because one of the things okay, so and for anybody who was living in Iraq, right, the whole theming of this is it is cyberpunk to the nth degree, right? So, it's, corporate future where corporations control everything, and, and people, which is also a really good science fiction way of kind of completely linking money to actual livelihood and power, right? Because the more money you have, the better augmentations you can have, the faster you are, the smarter you are, so on and so forth. I say all of that to say that there's a number of times when either you lose consciousness or something like that, and the UI is diegetic, right? Because it's what you see. And so there were a couple of times too where I saw a glitch and I was like, wait, is that my vision glitching or is the game glitching? And at some point, does it matter, right? Or because and to kind of what we were discussing before about glitches that I can find enjoyable is that with stuff like that, unless it breaks the game, I'm like, I don't know, man. Let's get into it. Like let's just
let's
weird.
Pretend
that, yeah, like maybe I'm crazy. Like maybe all of a sudden the reason why my UI kind of fell away and fell back was because the corpos are trying to hack my brain or something.
We're gonna see a lot more video games that are first person and set in like a cyberpunk future so that they can be like, no, that's not a bug. That's just part of the experience.
It's not a bug. It's a feature.
Yeah. You can't really pull that off in like Skyrim, right? Like if something doesn't render in Skyrim, it would be really weird if the developers were like, oh, Wizard did it.
Yes. No, but yeah, I did really enjoy the diegetic UI. I did also enjoy kind of the variations in, to your point, like the day-night cycle, is that even though it's all set in a very cyberpunky kind of grungy area, they did seem to have varied visuals, so you didn't feel like it was just constantly this dystopian like pressure like weighing down on you. There were places that you could go where it was like, oh, this is a nicer area, and those tended to be the richer areas, which is kind of the point, so I did really appreciate that. And also while I'm monologuing, I did appreciate, to your point of driving, I loved the driving. That was great. Any game, Spider-Man was similar, where it's like, I don't use the fast travel system because traveling through the world is genuinely enjoyable. I always loved that. And I do remember the cars being very varied in like how they looked, but also in how they handled in the controller, which I thought was kind of cool.
Well, and you phrased that exactly right, in my opinion, whether you meant to or not, which is the driving isn't good. I said I enjoyed it, right? Like the game does not handle like a car handles, and I regularly found very weird car things happening, but they were fun. And so when I had to go all the way across the map, I would drive the car, and you get the benefits of like, you get to listen to whatever's on the radio. You get to see like, oh, now I've traveled into the nice part of town. The gutters don't have ads for sex workers in them, right? Like it's, I mean, when you're, you're in the part of town like V lives in versus when you're in like the more like office building part of town versus when you're in like the nice part of town, the difference is unimaginable. And if you fast traveled, you would certainly still notice it, but seeing the transitions, right? Like when you go outside the city and you're in like the desert area and like nothing is neon and nothing is like weirdly illuminated at all hours of the day, no matter what. Like I think it's good to not just see those different areas suddenly, but like have the transition space between them, get a feel for like how far apart they are. And it's like, oh, the rich people live way far away, right? The people who live outside town, they're not like, oh yeah, they're kind of in the suburbs. They're in the godforsaken desert, way the hell out there, right? So like it really, and you can see the ads cascading out of the city, even from the desert, right? It's like, so having that sense of scale, I think the driving just, the silliness of the driving aside, like it contributes to the sense of scale.
Yes, absolutely. And to your point, right, is that like, even though the driving is, I would say that if the driving wasn't silly to some degree, then you'd probably get tired of it, you know? So, and I did also, as I mentioned, like because I did research, you know, which car is the best, the fastest, the whatever, you know? But then I did find myself spending money because I'm like, that car looks cool, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, I want that car, and it's like, but this other car is better. I'm like, yeah, but that one's cool looking. I remember the car that I drove the most was the one that was one of the ones where it was it was a complete opaque shell, and so the front the front window was digitally rendered in theory, you know. And I'm like, that is a degree of technology that is so cool and would never pass my, like, you would never have that in a car, because if all of a sudden something went a little bit wrong, you're now completely blind. I was like, that just wouldn't, I don't think that would ever really, it might exist in like a war machine that we would make for a very specific reason, but for like a vehicle, it makes me think of when our mutual friend, at one point we were talking about flying cars, and he, loving to pilot aircraft, said they will never invent flying cars. Have you seen how poorly humans maneuver in 2 dimensions? And you want to add pitch and yaw to that? it's like that, where it's just like, oh, you see how poorly we drive, and you want to add like a digital display in between the two of us?
Yeah, let's add some input lag to driving a car. That seems great.
Yeah. But yes,
there was an audiovisual thing that I did not have a good time with that actually made me come close to bailing a few times. This game has what I think you would call like industrial rock as the combat music, right? Where it sounds like metal grinding, like a lot of like, right? I actually enjoy that kind of music. The problem that I was having is that I would finish combat and the music was like, nah, I'm just going to stay here. It's late. I don't want to go home. I'm too drunk to drive. And I was like, no, music, the combat is over. I need you to leave because I have to go have this somber conversation with someone, and it's going to be really awkward if you're still here. And the music was just like, no, you won't even notice me. I'll just be in the background. It was really problematic. And the tiny little saving grace for it was if the game went into a full cutscene, like you lose camera control, like people are walking around and talking and stuff, like, which it does semi-regularly, especially for like the main story cutscenes, then the music would cut out because like it was actually loading into that cutscene like very seamlessly. But then when the cutscene ended, music was still there. Like next morning, still on my couch. Like, why have you not left yet? And the only way I could find to fix it was to quit and relaunch the game. And that there's always a chance that when someone quits your game, they don't relaunch it. So like every time I had to quit the game because I was like, this music has now been playing for like 20 real minutes. I was like, maybe I won't relaunch it. Maybe I don't owe the game this much effort. And so I did end up making it through, but it was very frustrating.
What platform were you playing it on? Because I don't remember having that issue when I was playing.
So I played on PC. I know that in general, in the early days, the game was so buggy that it was pretty uniformly buggy from platform to platform. That's probably deviated a little bit, where now like the PS4, PS5 has some of the same bugs, but some unique bugs, right? And yeah, because I was just like, because that would also, I would find that very obnoxious, you know. But yeah, no, I fortunately did not have to deal with that. I actually found the in general, not only did I find the sound effects and also the diegetic sound effects to be very helpful, but I did also, one of the things I have learned about myself over the last 5 years of us playing video games, over the last 10 years, right, is that I have found that the game's mechanics and aesthetics can all be dead on what I'm looking for. If like the in-game sound effects and animations, the hit sparks and sound effects aren't good, it means apparently a tremendous amount to me, because I'm like, look, I can sit here and come up with whatever mechanics I want and smash action figures together in real life, but I'm playing a video game because I want things to be epic. And I just remember one of the things I remember was did you do the quest where you get like the tank for the Desperado, whatever, the people outside of the city? Oh, I think I started that quest line, but I do not think I got all the way through that one.
So for that one, like, you go outside of there, you talk to Pan Am, and one of the things that they do is they hijack like a corporate.
Yeah, it's like the corpo
tank.
like floating transit thing.
Yeah, and so you get the tank. People die in the process. Very sad. But then you get this tank, and
but anyway, this tank.
It's very like the Loki meme.
I hope between the two of us, I die first, because your eulogy for me will be funny.
Everyone, Lions is gone. Very sad. Anyways, I'm here to talk to you about Sparkle Right, the new thing I'm chilling. So anyways, you get the tank, and you kind of jack into it, and you get to play around with it. And I remember thinking like, okay, this is kind of cool. It's obviously going to be kind of a set piece. I don't just have a tank to go everywhere right now. But I was like, let's see if this was worth the energy. And I fired that tank, and like the controller vibrated and went, and I was like, oh yeah, no, this was worth the time. And the same thing with the sound effects for like all the guns that you use. It all felt very satisfying to especially again with the haptics of the controller. They're very well done, I felt.
And super distinct designs too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they put a lot of love and care into the character builder, and then you almost never see yourself except in like a couple of cutscenes and when you look at yourself in the mirror. But and there are some very pivotal scenes where you look at yourself in the mirror, because obviously like your brain is being taken over. So there's a whole like, is that my face kind of thing that they go to a few times. But most of the game, what you see is the weapon you're holding, right? So having like these guns look like this, and this one's all like dudded up because you got it off of like some kingpin or whatever, so it's all like gold or chromed out or whatever. There's just a ton of variety, and none of it felt quite as cartoony as like the Borderlands guns that all sort of look like a 12-year-old designed them when they were supposed to be paying attention in math class. But like that fits that aesthetic, right? That would have been too over the top here, because these are guns you need to really use to like protect yourself, as like everybody keeps it. Everyone is very aware of how terrible it is to live in Night City, so they're just like, hey, you gotta have a gun, right? So like they're a normal tool of living in this horrible place, but they still have enough variety that if you are like quick switching in combat between like two pistols for some reason, it's obvious that like, oh, this is the pistol that's good at this, and this is the pistol that's good at that.
Yep. The one other thing that I would want to mention for audiovisual for me at least is I to your point, right, is that like all of it's very very unique. I also really felt I loved the unique outfits, to the point where like there was sometimes where they'd be like, hey, here's this really awesome mechanical outfit. I'm like, but that looks like crap. And even though I never see myself, these computers, these ones and zeros on my computer screen do see me, and it is important that they know that I look cool. So I say all of that to say that they didn't, because again, mechanically it doesn't really mean much, but you can go in and say, hey, I want my outfit to always look like this, no matter what I've got on. And I liked that a lot, because I was like, okay, now I can equip whatever insanity I need in order to mechanically be beneficial, to benefit me mechanically, but I can then look however I want, which means that because they've divorced mechanics from aesthetics, from the way that you look, they can make any of the outfits look bananas crazy, right? They can make them hyper-sexualized, hyper-not sexualized, because it's not that you've got the golden bikini that's the best outfit for the woman and the full plate mail that's the best outfit for the men. Mechanically, you can have whatever mechanics you want, and then the aesthetics can be whatever you want. So I remember I had a couple of different outfits for V. One of them was like because I played as man V the first time, and then I played as female V the second time. And for female V, I had one outfit that was like the suited assassin, with like the glasses and the nice suit, and she would like go in and I would actually play a little bit differently, because I'd be like, oh, well, I'm kind of like the suited assassin, so I'm going to go in there and I'm going to be like cold and calculated. And then I had like the wild colors, kind of like just go in, spray and pray, be like, I've got this, don't worry about it,
you gotta dress for the job you want.
Exactly. And so the fact that they included a whole wardrobe mechanic, to your point, in a game where you see your wardrobe a handful of times, I was like, that's nice. I like that.
I did. I prioritized the motorcycle as my main vehicle because, like, your friend dies and his mom is like, "Hey, he wanted you to have the motorcycle," and so I actually ended up driving that a lot, which is the one vehicle you consistently see yourself in because you can drive in third person. You can't play the game in third person, but you can drive in third person, and when you're on the motorcycle, that means you can see V driving the motorcycle. So I was like, I actually got to see my outfit like probably a disproportionate amount to someone who played the game and didn't ride motorcycles.
And actually, as sorry, I don't know if you had anything else for audiovisual, but as a transfer to mechanics, I will say that I felt that driving was impossible unless I was in third person. Like
Yeah, I played a little bit of driving games when I was young where they're like, oh, you have the windshield view where you can like see the dashboard and see the steering wheel and the speedometer and the radio and air conditioning, whatever. And I had never really developed that skill. Like, to me, driving is a Mario Kart thing where I am a magical floating camera that can see me and the area around me. So like yes, third person every single time.
Well, and this is where somebody smarter than me, maybe a scientist, would be able to opine more to this. But I do feel that the third person behind the vehicle, a la Mario Kart or a la the correct way to play Cyberpunk 2077, is closer to what we experience when we're driving because, one, your field of vision is way wider than it can be if it's mimicked with you in front of the wheel. Like your peripheral vision is more, and also too, if you're driving a car properly, you're not just like staring dead ahead. You're kind of, you're looking around, you're checking. Uh-oh. Oh man. How is your 17 accident cases coming along? So I think that the field of vision you're afforded in the third person is actually closer to the field of vision you're afforded when you're actually driving,
Yeah. And this is, what like VR helmets and ultra wide monitors are trying to address is like, here's a facsimile of what peripheral vision would be like. And it's why Mirror's Edge is like one of the only good first person platforming games, because they really thought hard about it, because otherwise like first person platforming kind of sucks most of the time.
Yep.
But yes, as a transition into the gameplay, that was lovely. And I want to now, as much as we are able to, really focus on our experience of the story. So let me lay the groundwork for how I chose to interact with the game, and then you can tell me how you chose to interact with the game. And I think they're probably different. So I went into this saying, I'm going to play this giant open world RPG where there's billion hours gameplay, and I'm going to just, eat my fill, right? I'm going to go in until I have seen the world, because I know the main story is only like 15 to 20 hours or something, but there's like 150 hours of side content, and I'm usually pretty down for that. And this time I wasn't. Something about the combat or side quests or something just didn't ever quite click with me. And here is what I decided to do. I cranked the difficulty down to easy. I decided to only use a katana, so I became the cyber samurai, because that made combat like a little more interesting, even though it was like turned down, the difficulty was turned down. And I also decided that V would not be out pussyfooting around trying to understand how the AI taxi company feels or what's up with this semi-sentient Coke machine, because V doesn't want to die. So I just plowed through the main story. Like, I took it very seriously, but I got maybe like 5 or 10 hours in and then abandoned side content. Only main story, hyper violent with the samurai sword, because I don't want to die, right? And so I ended up embodying like a very specific, very literal interpretation of the character. And then that ended up playing out at a bunch of story beats that I thought were super interesting. And that's the spoilery stuff that I want to like get into the nitty gritty of. But I think that is not how you played the game.
So I did experiment a little bit with the katana. I personally found the katana gameplay less engaging. I thought it was fun. It just wasn't as much fun. I more so went a mixture of pistols and shotguns. pistols for long range, shotguns for close range. And also, I really got a huge kick out of hacking people from a distance and watching them just like fall dead because I took over their AI. I enjoyed that to a degree too. I did the opposite of what you did, but kind of in a similar vein, because I think that with RPGs, we both kind of like to treat them like role-playing games, you know? So what I did was I did the opposite, where I didn't advance the main story. I advanced the main story as minimally as possible so I could do all the side content, because it doesn't really become like a crunch against time until like you're told like, oh, this will eventually happen to you. But like, I think that your doctor says, your Ripper doc says, like, it could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a year, but you will die, you know? And so I was like, oh, well, I'm going to live as much life as I can because I don't know, you know, what's going to happen. And so because I didn't move the main story forward, it was still in the nebulous, like, ooh, who knows when I'm going to die. And then once I did all the side content, I was like, okay, now I'm going to engage in the main plot. And they're like, oh man, you're going to die soon. I was like, oh no, now it's super frantic, you know?
I wouldn't have done
man,
all
I probably
that
should have
side
spent all the
content.
time, you know, helping people cross the street by hitting them with my car, but or you know, however I help them, you know.
Yeah. Well, and that's that was my recollection of you describing when you had played the game, you know, like a couple years ago, and the difference that creates is, I think, like palpable to how dark and negative of a story this is versus how like trying to be optimistic of a story it can be, because this game has I think like half a dozen different endings depending on some of the choices you make, and I got what is no question the bleakest ending, but because of how I had been playing the game, everything felt super cohesive, right? Super coherent story-wise and mechanically. To your point, I was looking forward to hacking people and being a cool cyber ninja who like broke people's brains. But you know what? When you don't do a lot of side content, you don't get a lot of skill points to invest. So I was, even though I was playing on easy, I was kind of underpowered. So I was constantly like scraping against the bad guys to just barely eke out a victory, right? Some of the boss fights were very hard. And every once in a while, it's like, oh, this is like a flying drone. So I would have to pull out a gun occasionally because I couldn't hack them and I couldn't get close enough to chop them with my cyber samurai sword. So I was like in this race against time where people were like, hey, V, right? Because you have the stupid little like HUD where people can pop up and like, they're like, hey, I'm the fixer in this part of town.
Oh,
come get side quests for me. And I was like, no, I'm dying. I have to figure this out. And I want to say, I'm describing this with some levity, but I was taking it like deadly seriously, right? Every time someone was like, oh, hey, V, we could really use your help on this, I was like, I would legitimately like to help you, person who seems like they deserve to be helped. But if you're not helped, you will be sad. If I am not helped, I will be dead. So I was just like ignoring friends, like people are trying to bond with me, and I was just like blowing people off left and right. And that mechanically kept me very underpowered, which kept combat like a little more interesting, but also a lot more simplistic because I didn't have the huge tool set that you had.
Right. And so I also had the yin and the yang, the opposite experience, where, you know, I ground out to the point where when I was doing the main story quest, I was wildly overpowered, you know, so I kind of walked in. One of the things, though, I remember, because one of the ways that I've also learned that I like to play games like this is I like to go to places where I like to have that same experience of barely scraping by, but I like to have it when I'm level 3 in the level 10 place, you know? So, like, I go to the place where it's like, oh, dude, you probably shouldn't be here yet. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but, like, I want to see if I can test my skill, get powered up, and then go back and just be like, I'm a golden god. I specifically remember at one point, and again, it makes sense when you look at, like, the fact that, oh, these people have biomechanical augmentations, but it was like something where they were like, hey, we need you to sneak into this club and steal some data. And I was like, by sneak in, you mean murder everybody and steal the data. Because occasionally, because you didn't do a lot of side content, the fixer, if it's supposed to be a stealth mission, and there's not a lot of them, but when they specifically say like, hey, be stealthy on this one, and you're not, you still get the rewards, but they do chide you. They're like, hey, I expected better. That was a mess, you know? And you still get the reward, but you don't get the knock-on reward, which I think is a good balance. But anyway, so they were like, hey, sneak into this place. And I walked up to the bouncer and they're like, hey, you got to leave your guns over here. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm not going to do that. And I pulled out my shotgun, pressed it against his chest and pulled the trigger, and then slowly looked up to his unaffected face as he pummeled me to death. Because I was like, oh, but apparently you haven't met Mr. Shuck. And he's like, no, we are very acquainted. We go back. You are. And I was like, oh, no, this. So if I remember correctly on that particular one, he didn't hit me, knocked me out like 3/4 of my health. I did manage to escape, which I imagined like the onlooker seeing me roll up to the club, you know, shotgun in hand, go walking in. And then like 2 minutes later, seeing me like come screaming out in a dead panic, like, no, I made a mistake. Leave me alone. You know? Get back in my car, drive off into the distance and be like, I'll come back later. So that was my lived experience.
When you have that moment with like a side quest or a main quest NPC, it is different than the throwaway NPCs that they put on the overworld map, because an experience I had that was similar to that was I was the bouncer. So I finished a main story quest and then I had to go to the other side of the map to do this next one. And my bike wasn't nearby and I forgot. I was like, oh, I can just like magically summon it. Right. So I was like, how am I going to get over there? Maybe I can go like steal a car or something. And then the fixer for the main story is like, oh, hey, V, now you got to get over here and get this other MacGuffin to this other person. And I was just like processing that information. And apparently this guy decided I had stopped on his street corner where he does drug deals. So he shot me in the arm. So I cut his head off and stole his car.
Nice.
Because he shot me. It was the middle of the day. I wasn't doing anything. But
you're like, dude, it's Tuesday.
Right. And it's just like, because there's a lot of overlapping volume and it's I think it's supposed to be overwhelming because it's like cyberpunky, right? But like it is also hard to interact with the game when you can't. There's no way to make V turn and say, excuse me, I'm on a phone call, right? So like, because I'm standing there being yelled at by this fixer of like, oh God, you got to go do this main story thing. And I'm like, yeah, I got to go do this main story thing. And then I'm like, my arm. And then I like, you know, you close the HUD and you look and you're like, dude. And he was like, hey man, you're on our turf. And it's like him and his, you know, like partner or whatever. And I was just like, is that your car over there running with the door open? And then I killed them and took their car.
Nice.
And then I went about my life. Right. But it was just like V as a person would not want to comport themselves that way. But V in this horrible life or death situation is becoming against their will the cyber psycho. Right. It's not that my augmentations are turning me into the cyber psycho. It's that like the technology of the world has allowed me to be put into a social situation that is turning me into the cyber psycho. Right. And I was just like, as I was getting more flippant toward my friends and more violent toward anyone who stood in my way, I was like, yeah, this is, what sort of life will I have if I survive this? Like, who will I be on the other side of this?
Well, and so I think we discussed this briefly before, but to that point, I really did like the cyber psycho mythos, and you know, because it gives you two things. It gives you, you know, some quests to go on to stop cyber psychos, right? But also two is that they're like, hey man, you can do whatever you want in this universe, do whatever you want, but you don't want to be a cyber psycho, right? So maybe don't be a complete murder hobo. And it did stop me a few times, because one of the things that I deal with sometimes is being very petty in video games, where, you know, like when it's the ones and zeros I'm hurting. If it's another human, I won't do it, right? But you know, there was one point where I need to get from point A to point B. It was really close. I didn't need my car, so I was walking and I just happened to jaywalk, and then, you know, a car was driving at 100 miles an hour, because that's the only speed anybody ever drives at, and they hit me. And I was 100% in the wrong. I walked out into the street without looking while the light was red. It was saying not to walk, you know? And so I got hit with the car, and the person's like, hey, asshole. And I was like, and so I just went into my augmentations, collected the one that allows me to blow up vehicles with my mind, and blew up his vehicle with my mind. And I was like, you know what? That was some cyber psycho stuff. I shouldn't do that. Shame on me. And moved on. But a part of me was like, that, I don't know, that's pretty sociopathic, where you're like, oh, this is part of my caution. I mean, I just killed 3 people, but like cautionary tale, right?
Yeah. Well, and I assume you left a critical detail out, which is you went into your augmentations, you equipped the one that lets you blow up vehicles with your mind, you equipped your sunglasses, and then put your back to the car and then blew it up with your mind.
Absolutely, because, can't look at the explosion.
Yeah, no, cool Vs don't look at explosions.
So how did your story end?
Well, I knew I was doing something novel by like the average play standards. When I had this interaction with a friend, I was telling them that like how I was playing through, and I said, "Oh yeah, then in the cutscene where you go and you invade the compound of the sister of the big corpo like overlord, and you're there to like get something," and she went, "What? What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, like she says she'll help you, and then you can go over there." And she was like, "Wait, you can accept her help?" And I said, "You can deny her help?" And then that was because that's very near the end of the game. And that was when I started to put together like, oh, this is where the branches start, right? So in the main story, and to the game's credit, you get a big on screen like, hey, you're going into the end game now, pal. So, like,
this far, no further.
Right. So basically there is like 4 or 5 giant corporations that run the world. They have more power than governments, and they literally fight wars, right? So like that is the level of dystopia we're dealing with. The daughter of the founder of the big one in Night City offers to help you get Keanu Reeves out of your brain because her company made that technology, right? And so you end up in an opportunity where you go and talk to her, and she says, hey, I can help you if you help me stop my brother, because my brother is now running the company because my father got murdered as the MacGuffin in the opening part of the game, and now he's kind of acting the fool. And so it didn't even occur to me to say no to her because she seemed like the only one who would be able to help me because it is her company's secret, possibly illegal, definitely immoral technology. So I was like, yes, please. So that set me on the path of you go, you stab some guys, you get some technology, and then you go to the Corpo building, the one that Keanu Reeves 50 years ago had blown up before he dies, and they put you into his brain, and they've now rebuilt it, and it's the Corpo Tower. I can't even remember the name of the company. I feel bad.
Osaka?
Yes. So you go into Japanese stuff has invaded the west coast of America Tower, and you... I mean, their culture is very cool. I would take their stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, like if I was going to be a corpo, I'd go with Osaka. Like
big
that's
time.
The right. Yeah.
So you go into the tower, and I ended up playing through the end part of the game with that friend because she had already played through it, and she is watching me just walk through the tower, escorted by the sister, no combat, everything's fine, and she's just like, "What is happening? This is supposed to be like a huge set piece where all this combat happens because you have to like break into the tower," and I was just like, no, I just said I would do what she wanted, and like she's helping me. so like you skip a bunch of combat, and then the brother flips out, and then he 6 guards on you. So some of the combat does still happen, right? And you still get some of those set piece moments. And then the boss battle is a little bit different where you fight like Andy
Adam
Smith.
Smasher?
Yeah, Adam Smasher, Adam Eve. You fight Adam Smasher, and Keanu Reeves is like,
just so you don't feel bad. The reason why I remember that is not because of the Cyberpunk 2077 game, but because he's referenced a lot in the Cyberpunk Netflix series as well. Which now that you played the game, you should check that out. It's pretty good.
Yeah. So you still have the big boss fight with him, but I think it's either at a little bit different time or the circumstances are a little bit different, but there is still like a big climactic boss fight, right? And then you go to the brother, and the sister and the brother have like this little moment where he's like, am I a piece of shit? And she's like, yeah, you are. You are, but it's okay because I still love you. And he's like, what's going to happen to me now? And she's like, no, shh. And it's like, oh, he's going to die. Okay, she is going to either kill him or have his death ordered. And then she says, hey, I'll help you, but we got to like dump your body onto the space station. And at this point, I'm like, oh no, like I wanted this problem to be solved, but at what cost? And so what happens is they send you up to their orbiting space station to have their doctors work on you. And all in between some of these major cutscenes, you get like internal cutscenes where you're talking to Keanu Reeves and he's like, are you seriously just going to like delete me? Like, we're not even going to talk about this. And I was just like, you like, we didn't bond, man. We didn't do any side stuff. Like, as far as V is concerned, you are still brain cancer. Like, there is no reason she would feel bad about any of this. She disagrees with your politics. She disagrees with your motives. I played as Lady V. She just disagrees with like everything you stand for, and you're killing her. So like, yeah, dude, you're going to get deleted. But then the final little twist of the knife is you find out that the point of this technology is to make corpos immortal. And and the father of the Asaka Corporation, as a way of curbing his son's craziness, he has now been inserted into the sun. So he's immortal now. And that's, I'm in the hospital bed watching the news and I'm like, oh no.
I have done bad things.
Oh no, I have helped them do something truly horrible to save my own life. And like, the game doesn't even pussyfoot around about it. Like, they cut to like people on the street being like, oh, so rich people get to be immortal now. That's the world we live in. And I was like, oh, okay, they get it. So, so then you end up in a situation where you keep doing these like simple tests and the doctor's like, hey, this is not working. Your body is going to die. But hey, we can copy your brain and put you in brain jail. Do you want to live by being in brain jail? And I said, yeah, because the point of all the horror was to not die. So if you're telling me now my only way to survive is to go live in brain, either Johnny and Keanu Reeves and I die, or I get to at least survive in brain jail, like, man, I guess, right? But that's like the corpo's like final screw you moment is you do all this horror and you go live in corpo brain jail for eternity. And I was like, yeah, this is a very cyberpunk realistic ending. I was born in hell. I lived my life in hell. And now I'm going to go spend eternity in hell because no amount of screw the corpo's pluck was ever going to topple this system. And I was actually really happy with this incredibly sad, but very like thematically appropriate ending. And the final cherry before I will finish my monologue is during the credits, they do the Fallout thing of showing you the end result of the side missions you did, right? Like, here's the super mutants and how things went for the super mutants, right? It's exactly like, I associate that with Fallout, right? I didn't do any of the side missions. So what I got was a lot of literally heartbreaking, literally tear-jerking phone calls from friends and family who don't know that I am in corporate brain jail. And they're just like, hey, V, you said you might be able to help me with that thing. And things are getting really bad. And if you could call me, like, we miss you. We're worried about you. And just call after call of people just like on the verge of tears and then silent credits after that. And I was like, I did it. I played the perfect game of Cyberpunk. This is how this story is supposed to go. Everybody else did it wrong.
Yeah, so no, that's really interesting. One, good on the developers for allowing that to be an ending, because I do feel that, because I think I played it all the way through twice. I played it like 5 times, but normally I would do all of the side missions, play a little bit of the story, and be like, I'm done. And then, because I enjoyed the gameplay and I played through a couple times. So 2 things. One is the corpos are going to live forever. Yes, co-sign that. But also I put some thought to it, and I was like, why, if the goal is to live forever, why did they do the experiment with, like, the experimental version with V, or not with V, with Johnny, you know? And I truly believe it's because you see through Johnny's mind when the president of the Asaka company is like looking at the horror of the building being exploded. He's not a big fan of Johnny, you know? And so I do think that the reason why he's like, oh, we're going to do this with Johnny is so that way when he could live forever, he could torture Johnny forever.
That is absolutely how that comes across. Is like, either this fails and we learn something, or it succeeds and I get to torture you for eternity.
Yes, and so that's dark. So the way that I played it through was with the people out in the wastes. I got super close with them because tanks, and the cool thing is that the way you get in so they give you a choice where they say, hey, do you want to involve them in taking down Asaka? And I was like, and they say specifically, they're like, if you do this, you may be putting their lives in danger, and I was like, you know what? They've offered to help, and I would be being selfish if I did not give them the opportunity to help me. So I was like, yes, I will let them help. Because every critical decision, I did put a lot of philosophical thought into. So I was like, yes, I will let them help. So we crash in, battle, fight. And then basically the choice I was given at the end was like, hey, your mind is falling apart. Johnny is going to take over your mind. So like either... Option A was that your body like gets terminated basically, or that you completely relinquish control to Johnny, And so because I did bond with Johnny, I did have a bunch of, different stuff, different moments, is I was like, you know what? If I look at this from a utilitarian point of view, at least one person survived this mess, So, but again, to your point, where it's like, V still dies, So, which is again that kind of like bleak worldview of like, hey, what? No matter what you do, it will all be for naught. And so I think that and again, I don't know all of the different endings, but they do a good job of making it seem like that all of the victories are Pyrrhic. It is just the degree to which they are Pyrrhic that you can control, right? So it's like all of them will be like, you won at what cost? And you just, you said maximum cost. Like I won, except that I got nothing out of it, and I have cost the world something terrible. Whereas I was like, well, I still died. But most Pyrrhic, flawless. But yeah, no, I think that to your point, I do agree that all of the different stories that are told, I don't think that there is a way for you to go through the game and not tell a cyberpunk story. Even the not to spoilers, minor spoilers, I guess, but like the Netflix series is also very in that same line of like, hey, we're going to tell a story, but it's not like all sunshine and rainbows at the end. Like, there is a ton of cost, and maybe I think like the best ending you can hope for is the looking out upon the nuclear wasteland and everything's destroyed, and you just see like the one flower starting to grow of like, oh, but there's still potentially hope. But I'd say that definitely there was some cyber, definitely there was some punk. There might be 2,077 endings.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less